Stop guessing, start understanding. Refinement isn't broken because of poor stories, it's broken because teams don't talk about what really matters. And this is why we created Rebase.
Hi everyone, welcome to Control Alt Delight. Today we will be speaking to Shane Turner, our business analyst technical lead.
Hey everyone, welcome to Control Alt Delight, giving people an outside-in view of the world at Global Kinetic. I'm Shane, this is my co-host for today, Mark Stairs, and today we're going to be talking about how we approach tools and problem solving in Global Kinetic. Stairs, you want to say hello? Maybe tell everyone what you do?
Thanks, Shane. Yes, super excited to be a part of this one, being the first one as well. I think it's going to be a great session. My role at Global Kinetic is back-end technical lead within the .NET and SQL chapters. So I just try and make sure that quality and standards and things like that are adhered to, amongst many other things. Thanks, Shane.
Awesome. And for myself, I didn't even say my role. I'm a business analyst at Global Kinetic as well, and also starting to look more into that lead space, ensuring we are upholding those quality and standards, like you say. And it was quite a shift for me, moving from just being in a role where you've got to worry about yourself to now making sure that quality and standards scale across the company. And I guess that's where the topic for today's call comes in, looking at those problems. How do we start to solve them when they get tabled to say the chapter is experiencing something? Now we need you to go forth and solve it. And you and I, we've worked quite closely together in the development space and in the analysis space, and now bringing it together. I know you've had some problems raised that I had to try and troubleshoot, and likewise. And I guess today we wanted to talk about how we've been approaching that.
Yes, brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Shane. I think being a company that deals in tech to sort of struggle with items just because it's the way that we've done things for so long. You get used to doing it like that. So like you said, in order to just create a little tool to help you out, I think it's a brilliant idea, and to see how we can roll these things out and trial and test them is amazing.
Awesome. And you mentioned you had a few questions for me. I know we were chatting and you were like, let's unpack this. So you had a couple of questions that we wanted to just brainstorm and work through today and see if we can maybe help the person watching this or the people watching this take forward problem solving or tooling into their own companies.
Yes, 100%. I know you've created quite a few tools already at the company. We joke about Shane's tool belt that's growing. But I guess one of the questions I had that I have written down is, can you maybe give us a little breakdown of what the biggest lessons and potential surprises along the way has been?
AI really has opened up the door. I know it's quite a touchy subject in some spaces, but for me, not being a programmer and coming from an artistic background, it really has just removed that barrier in terms of needing to have deep technical understanding. So whilst I initially had to learn how to do some very basic programming, it was very entry-level C# programming, some basic JavaScript, some basic HTML, I could never scale my ideas because I was always limited by what I could do. And so when it came to the AI, it now allowed me to do so much more. But one of the big problems is that because you can make so much progress so quickly, it gives you a very false sense of security when starting out with ideas or starting to prototype things, because you can get a visual or a little play sort of implementation or a little experiment that has 15 things that your tool can do, and it all looks wonderful, but none of them are finished. And I find that there's something Tom Cruise actually said. He said, someone asked him about how does he progress his stunts, and he was saying, you need to be able to crawl before you can walk, or walk before you run before you leap. And I find the same thing is when using AI for tooling. Start with just the smallest thing first, and then layer on and build on it versus asking for this, and you get this, but you have no idea how to work with it or how to do anything with it. And that was one of the first things I found when using these AI platforms, is it gave me such a good visual on what I wanted, but I had no idea how to work with it. And then I had to go right back to the beginning and start just solve for this and then layer on. So it actually forces you to take a very sort of iterative approach to the way you solve for tools, if you can't build it yourself, of course.
And I think one of the important items or ideas that we also try to tell our estates and our devs and anyone using AI is to be incredibly careful and double check everything that it is telling you in terms of code coming your way that you want to use to try and understand as much of it as possible. Obviously, we use AI, and people who don't always code use AI to help speed up these things that they might not be able to do otherwise. But it's to not just use it blindly. And I think that it helps to understand in places what's happening so that if there is an issue down the line or you need to start to make changes, you don't have to start with a whole new prompt basically from the beginning again. As you can probably attest to, V1 never makes it out into production. It's always V2, V3, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think that's where someone like yourself has the advantage. Everyone's putting the emphasis on how product designers suddenly have so much power being able to use AI. And I still think the development world actually has most of it. Whilst product designers and people using AI from a design perspective can start to bring their ideas to life, is being, like you say, being able to troubleshoot it. If you don't have that technical background, is so difficult, where someone like yourself can see the output, see how it gets there, especially from a coding perspective, and then start to really use that to your advantage, which for me would take a lot longer to sift through, or with far less competence in the way I'm approaching it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Shane. And I think without further ado, maybe we can jump into one of the tools that you have created. Which tool will you be starting with, and can you tell us a little bit more about it?
I would say the biggest one that we are quite excited about at Global Kinetic is a tool called Rebase. This was something that I'd actually made before AI came into the coding space, and that was our sort of pilot experimentation that we rolled out towards the end of last year. This was a way for us to try and improve the discussions that were happening inside of refinement sessions. We noticed that our refinement sessions within the delivery team space were sometimes I want to say overruled, but very dominated by one or two more senior people, whereas the rest of the team would be a bit more quieter. And what we found was that when that disengagement was happening, the votes became a bit more generic. Everyone just tended to very quickly anchor to the vote of the most senior person, or the person that they thought would be doing the work. They would just follow whatever their vote was. And Rebase really brought a way for us to visualize the complexity behind the stories, to put a real meaning to the effort that was going into the stories. And for me, those voting numbers, those poker scores that we tend to call it, I've always struggled with that. Even the first time I arrived at Global Kinetic, I just saw people go into this phone, write a number, everyone holds it up. I don't understand this. I don't get it. How can we just put a number, a generic number, to a story with real detail? It's meant to represent so much, and you plan your whole sprint based on it. And we were seeing that. We were seeing that before Rebase, where our sprints were often running late. The estats were just being pushed right to the line because stories were coming in late. Sprints were always in the red from a burn down perspective. And then we brought this in, and we found from the first session, the discussion was richer. The contribution was suddenly across the team. The votes were far more anchored and relevant to the detail that was happening inside the story. And that was very exciting. Through Rebase, run over 200 stories have gone through Rebase at this point. So it's a well-tested tool, but all of that's living inside Global Kinetic right now. And so if we look at that and the success that it's had, now it's about, what could be next for the tool and the success it could bring.
Yes, I remember when you first rolled that out into our delivery team. From the get-go, it got a lot of positive feedback, and we saw the engagement from the team, because all of a sudden, instead of just talking to a PBI, and maybe for some extra context, is our teams are all like virtual teams. We all sit online through Teams and doing refinement. So instead of just talking through a PBI with lots of text, having something pop up on the screen that's visual, starts to question why and how would you start to do these things. I know maybe that's more of a planning task, but in order to break that down, and relatively quickly as well, and the more we used Rebase, we just got quicker and quicker because it became a smoother process. And you like, okay, I know this is what's coming because we have these different areas to focus on. So yeah, from our side, like you said, that rollout definitely helped that engagement from people. You could see it, because normally you can see when people's eyes start to focus elsewhere or the head drops a little bit, you've lost someone, where Rebase definitely encourages that engagement.
I remember one of the meetings, we were having a refinement session actually just before the tool arrived, and you were running as the project manager on that at the time. And I remember you calling someone out on the meeting, and they were just not there. They were just so not present. And it was a big driver for us benchmarking the success that the tool would have. And just the way that it did bring engagement across the departments, like you say. And you mentioned the planning side of things as well. Since introducing the tool, and this is now across multiple teams that have been using it, we haven't had one late running sprint since introducing it, which was insane. From having it every sprint for no sprints running late. I think that was wild. And like you say, the time saved in Refinement was also massive, because I know some people, they run Refinement sessions for an hour and a half and maybe they get through 2 or 3 stories. Now we're running 1 hour sessions and we're getting through 6, 7 stories, fully refined, fully understood and planned accurately, which is a massive time saver for the team as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
All right. Now, what I'd like to do is take you through Rebase and show you a little bit more about how it works.
One of the things that we found inside of our refinement sessions was that the traditional Scrum poker process felt very subjective. And the actual act of voting to get those different score numbers was resulting in a lot of differences that took time to then resolve. People were either not engaged fully and needing extra explanations about why a story is a certain effort or not. And this was burning through a lot of time. So we seeked out to solve for this. And one of the things that we did was implement a tool called Rebase. And Rebase was brought about to help teams really visualize the complexity behind the work of the development that's going into the story. So I'll give you an example. If we have a look at a story that we've been working on, this is a front-end story that seeks to bring about some screen elements into a platform that we've been busy building. Now, when we speak about the story, we're transferring all the context of that story, and the team needs to now think about what goes into the story to bring it to life. And then they go and they vote on that. Now, with Rebase, what we do is we go into the discussion of the story and we select the areas for conversation. So over here, we've got testing. There's no back end on the story. This is a front end related story. And now we put the conversation into each of the departments. So the front end will then talk through the screen, weigh up, how much complexity is involved. Is there any validations? And these different touch points are all fully configurable to be customized on how your team works. Is there any integrations, code review? And so we go through each of the departments, each person or the team gets to speak up and represent the complexity in the respective work areas. And once that's done, we can then recap it more accurately to look at not only the complexity of the different areas involved, but also is there other things we need to consider on planning day? Like, is there more time that is maybe needed in a specific area? And what this does is it helps form a really nice picture of what's involved. So on the front end side, we can see what's involved here. On the testing, this is what it's going to need to get over the line. Now, this gives everyone a far more informed set of touch points to have a look at when making that vote. And as we found from using this tool, the voting is far more aligned. One of the things Rebase can also do is actually give its own effort estimation, which we've actually found is to be really accurate in conjunction with the team's different voting styles. This is obviously based on the Fibonacci sequence, but you can customize this to use t-shirt sizing or anything else that companies might be using. If I show you how this gets represented at the end, this was the story that we looked at. So here was the screen, and the team recapped all the different context behind the story. And then, of course, you can see how that all gets represented. So this is how the team voted the complexity from a front-end perspective with any time considerations, as well as on the testing side. So you can see very quickly how it helps to represent visually all the complexity that goes into stories. Well, thanks everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Control, Alt and Delight, giving you that outside in view at the world of Global Kinetic, and looking forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye for now.